Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This is season 2 of It's Going to Be All Right. My name is Clayton Gwen,
And my name is Niklas Minterovic.
and after a extensive summer holiday for both of us, we've had, I guess it's been a month and a half since we've seen each other.
Yeah, I think so.
Longer than that since we've seen each other in the flesh, but we're trying a few new things. So if anybody
like
wants
live.
to, yeah,
I haven't seen you physically in a couple of months. No, more than that.
Longer
Maybe
than
like
that.
3, 4, 5 months.
It's
super
been
strange.
a while, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been conducting this podcast remotely from Oslo and from Fredrikstad, where Niklas is, and we're trying out some slightly different things at the start of this season. We're going to try recording our conversation for YouTube so that there's video so you can see us. So for those of you who would like to see our beautiful smiling radio faces, we'll link to our YouTube channel where we also put up the podcast. And otherwise, if you're just listening, well, welcome back.
Welcome back, season 2. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But we've got a few changes as well too that we're planning on doing for this season.
Yes. First of all, last season we recorded one new episode each week, but we're thinking about, or we're going for one episode every other week instead. And the reason for that is, as we talked about during a meeting we had this morning, it was a really good thing to record one podcast each week in the spring, because we got so much stuff out there really quickly and we had so many different topics to cover. But now I think it's about time to focus more on just keeping the quality real nice, real good. And we also have a lot of other stuff to do.
Mm-hmm. We're trying to transition into the new normal in the post-COVID. Although you can't really say post-COVID because everybody keeps saying that the second wave is coming back. But the bi-weekly is going to be a little bit easier for us so we can focus on developing other digital resources. Niklas, you're lecturing a whole lot this semester. I still have my own PhD research to end up working on. So we'd like to be able to use time in between each week where we can focus on some other things, but still be able to provide you a good quality podcast. And we'll wait and see what the upcoming semester and season is going to throw at us. We're still hearing that places are opening up. University should be back to some semblance of normal. This is up in the air. We don't know how things are going to be going here in Norway or in other places around the world. So the situation could always change, but we're planning for the worst and hoping for the best here.
Exactly. And I remember the first episode of All Right was recorded in the studio, just like very close to my office actually. But we only got to do the first episode in the actual studio. All the other episodes have been recorded just like you see right now. I'm in my dining room and you're in your office, I think.
Yeah.
So that's been like the way we've done this for 5 months, 4 months, something like that.
It might be the way it keeps going, but we'll see. Hopefully we get to be face-to-face in the studio as well, too, sometime soon.
Hopefully, but I mean, this is only my opinion, but it seems like so many people have this idea that everything is going to go back to normal quite fast. And I'm a pessimist, to be honest. And I think we're going to have to deal with this whole situation for years to come in some degree. I mean, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But I think we need to be really patient and just kind of accept that this is my life now. This is the way things going to be, and there's a lot of positive things about it as well. To be honest, at least for me, I feel very privileged. I've gotten the opportunity to be with my family, my kid, As all of you know, that I'm very much into climbing, and I haven't been able to go to the indoor gym, but I don't like that too much anyways. So I've had free access to the outdoors for the entire spring. So
And
my life has
lucky
been
for us that it's been
pretty good.
pretty wonderful summer here in Norway. And, speaking of, what is going to be the new normal and how patient we need to be, because we had talked about this, just in a conversation that we had last week. And it's very likely that this upcoming semester, we're going to very likely expect sort of a hybridization of the traditional in-classroom, at-work lifestyle with kind of the lockdown, isolation, quarantine sort of lifestyle. And that really got us thinking, like, now is maybe a good time with the upcoming academic semester. People are coming out of their break, to really kind of get into a new groove, a new step, if you will, especially with a lot of incoming students. We have incoming bachelor and master's students. We have incoming PhDs. You're doing all of the intro week lecture stuff for the Writing Center, Niklas.
Lots of them right now.
Yeah. So
I'm getting new emails every day.
Suddenly everybody's back in the office and the email box is blowing up. And so we'd sort of thought we covered a lot of stuff for how to, last season in the spring, how to kind of deal with motivation and working in isolation, working digitally, working remotely, sort of making that transition in ways to be effective and motivated at home. And that's probably going to continue. Especially for anybody who's studying, like, you still need to maintain a lot of home work ethic for the work that you would do outside of the classroom. And we thought that this would be a really good episode to sort of go into a very fundamental thing that we've had 6 months, give or take, we've never really bothered to talk about, which is, how do you actually just take good notes? What are the strategies for just being a good student or a good researcher? And we're hoping we can cover some of that for you, both for traditional learning and study practices and things, the new digital technologies and digital learning approaches that might also have some great benefits to you.
Well, first of all, there's lots of ways to take really bad notes. We could start talking about that. I mean, because I've been through lots of different really bad systems as a student. I remember my first couple of years as a bachelor student at the University of Oslo. I was kind of trying to just develop some kind of strategy, and I was also way too lazy to go to like a writing clinic, or they were putting up all these, like, could go to like a course almost where they learned you how to make mind maps and all of that stuff, but I was too busy apparently with doing all the stuff. I don't know, reading and just trying to
partying.
Yeah, a lot of that.
Maybe just getting your footing in a new academic environment.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I wasn't paying too much attention to that. So I was really trying to develop my own systems. And I remember I was going through the classic, like the thing you see in TV shows, and where they have this fluorescent yellow marker, and you just like
the highlighter.
The highlighter, yeah. It's really bad. I wouldn't suggest that to anyone. And there's a reason for that. First of all, if you read an entire book and you've highlighted a lot of different stuff, first of all, you need to be pretty good at highlighting to know what to highlight and what not to highlight. Mm-hmm. That requires
there's some skill there.
There's some skill there, yeah, most definitely, and some experience. And then it's like, if you highlight something but you don't add a comment to it, you don't know what you thought. Like, why did you find this interesting? How can you apply this to anything? Like, it's there's no context that will tell you anything about why this is important.
And so keeping a sense of relevance to the highlight. Yeah, totally vital. And I think I would just say that same sort of practice, as like a bad note-taking technique, is sort of the verbatim note-taking in a lecture setting, where you're trying to write down everything that's already being presented to you. You're trying to write word for word what the professor or the lecturer is presenting
saying
on the screen or what they're saying. And you're not, I think in that way, it's sort of like the overuse of highlighting approach, thinking that all of this stuff is important. Well, if everything is important, nothing is important, right?
Exactly.
And the same happens with just listening and note taking. So it's sort of some things that we've talked about in previous episodes, knowing what you're reading for. So you know what to extract from that reading as relevant information. And the same thing, what is it that you are listening for that's going to help you to take a relevant note? Because it's easy to have these bad practices that you think are good, but I mean, let's be honest, who wants to go back and read through hundreds of pages of lecture notes that are all just like word for word, especially when the professors tend to give you those lecture slides at the end of the class anyways.
So it seems
what was the point of
pointless.
even writing it down?
Or the same with reading over everything you highlighted in a book. I mean, the thing is that if you highlighted like one sentence, you have to read at least the entire paragraph to get the context and kind of understand what this actually means. And so if you highlight a lot of things, that basically means that you have to read the entire book again. And then the point is gone. And the same, I mean, if you're in a lecture, for example, and there's a PowerPoint presentation on the screen, you don't need to write any of that because you're going to get the presentation afterwards anyways. So you could focus on writing some of the stuff the professor says, and then you could kind of try to merge your notes and the PowerPoint presentation. And that's a possible approach. But you just have to, I don't know, I wouldn't at least spend too much time on writing down what's in the presentation, because that's just, it's extra work that doesn't really give you anything.
And I think that this is one of the hard parts, whether reading or listening to a lecture, is trying to dissect and distill what is relevant. What are the big ideas? Because very often it's, a lot of people get caught up in the small details, numbers, statistics, little factual tidbits, and you neglect to look at the connection to a much larger theory, method, concept that is sort of at the core of what the reading or the core of what that lecture topic or the core of what your course is. And so how do you sort of establish what is relevant when taking notes? And I would say in the more traditional classroom, for bachelor and master students who are doing a semester-long course, like read over the course description that's provided in the academic calendar when you're registering for courses. What are the outline goals? Those should be stated. And also think about what are some of the key concepts or big ideas that are presented in that 1 to 2 paragraph description of the course. That might give you a good sense of some of the bigger ideas that you can try to latch onto that are being presented.
And another thing, if you're really lucky, you will also get the evaluation criterias. Isn't that the word in English? Evalueringskriterier in Norwegian.
Yeah.
Because that will...
Okay. Oh, we have a guest on our podcast.
This is so crazy. You know what happened? Take a look at this. It thought that I said clitoris.
Artificial
it's
intelligence
so crazy that
is
this
so
happened
intelligent sometimes.
During a podcast. Amazing. I've never seen that happen. It just hooked up like the Wikipedia article of a clitoris.
Like, what word did we even say that would have come close to...
Criterias.
Criterias.
Now it happened again.
Oh...
It might be something with my pronunciation. It's
welcome to season 2, everybody. We get down and dirty with the down and dirty. Everything that you wanted to know about sexual education.
We just, implement it into academic writing as we go. I just have to I don't know what I'm going to do. Turn it off?
I mean, we could question your computer. Why did it think that that was relevant to bring up? And you know what? Okay, I am going to segue this. We're just going to run on the Google Assistant or Siri popping up the word clitoris here. Is that what are you listening for? Like how it's these sorts of things in the class. Like when you hear something that just doesn't seem to really make a lot of sense, there's this strange tendency in university classrooms for people to just shut up and wonder about these things quietly, alone, and they never do the simple thing to ask a clarifying question that would probably help them to understand either the relevance of that, a larger connection to whatever it was that caused them a bit of confusion in the first place. So that's immediately you and I, like without even thinking about it, we just had to question, like, why is that happening? What is going on here? And out loud, we verbalized it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
but I think there's definitely something
notes.
about my pronunciation.
It
I guess
could,
I got to practice my English. That's
maybe.
the
It
lesson
could have
here.
been that, but I want to throw that little tidbit in there too of like a big part of, you know, what's so great about being in a lecture, whether it's a digital lecture where you have communication with students and the professor or a physical lecture hall, is that if something comes up that you don't really get why it's being presented, you should ask. You should try to clarify and get that figured out. And this is what's harder with taking notes with reading, because you can't ask those questions to a piece of paper and
No.
get a response back. You have to think this over yourself.
But you can also ask Siri, of course.
Totally. She'll help you out.
Or you can Google it, because like we've been telling a lot of stories here, and there's two stories that are somehow connected to this. One is I remember I had this book as a part of my curriculum when I was a master's student, I think. Yeah, first year master's student. And it was very, very difficult. It was written by a French philosopher. So, of course, it was difficult to understand. That's a part of that tradition, right? So I was struggling with it, but at the same time, I thought it was very fascinating. So I couldn't quite get a grip of what it was trying to tell me or communicate. So I was just Googling it. And I found this PhD student that was going through a lot of different philosophy texts, and he was explaining this very nicely to me, and that was a very useful resource for me. And it's not just like my opinion. I based a term paper on my understanding of this text with his help, and I got an A. So, and then I also got the opportunity to lecture about this topic later. So I kind of got a proof that this was a good approach.
And I think that
a lot of smart people out there.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point that we can tend to sit and think that all of the information that we should be getting is going to be contained in the course lecture and the course readings. But these readings are not always clear, easy to understand. We've talked about this a lot in previous episodes, what causes unclear and poor writing. That reduces your ability to understand the main points. But at the same time, you can definitely encounter lecturers who they're just not very good communicators. They're not very clear, that things aren't very well connected. So one thing that you should try to do if you want to really take better notes in the lecture room, I would say is, have an internet search up. So when they say something, you can do a little bit of additional research and a bit of quick reading. And basic Google searches, Wikipedia, for example, anything that is very general. I'm not saying
even YouTube.
Even YouTube. There's tons of people out there who can go and explain incredibly complex ideas in very clear and concise ways. So we have all of these additional tools that can help you to understand your research, the information that's being presented to you in a classroom or in a reading. But what it really means is you also need to be able to kind of figure out what are your questions about the topic and where can you go to find somebody who's going to present that information to you in a way that makes sense to how you prefer to learn. So what it really means is you need to be motivated to not just take things at face value, but if you have troubles understanding something or you want to understand more about something, you have to do a little bit of work for it. But it's not hard work. Type on a computer,
It's not so
YouTube,
difficult. Yeah.
and you're gonna find really great information out there.
Another thing is, you mentioned this right now, that you have to have some kind of purpose. So if you read a text, it's much easier to kind of get into a conversation with its contents if you already know quite a lot. If you have some kind of term paper that you're going to write, like some way you can use the information that you find in this source. But if you don't have that yet, if this is like the beginning of your life as a student, first year bachelor student, you have no direction, what are you going to do? I mean, I remember reading this book called Engraving the Savage. And I thought the book was really interesting, but I didn't have any direction. So I remember I had developed this new note-taking system, which basically was, you just read. I had the book in front of me, and I was just writing notes on my computer as I was reading. And this kind of evolved into this ridiculous thing where I ended up writing the book. Right?
Or rewriting the book.
Yeah, rewriting the book. Sometimes just writing it, like not really changing anything. So that wasn't a good approach. The point is that if I had some kind of direction, it would be a lot easier for me to pick out what was important and what was not important. So do we have any... Because this is the start of the semester, and there is a lot of students that they're just out of, what do you call it? High school? Junior high?
Yeah. High school.
High school.
And they're just fresher than green spring grass.
Yes, very fresh. It's like a little, almost like a little seed. Anyways, they don't really have any direction. They're interested in, let's say, sustainable development or landscape architecture or anything else, but they don't really know what to specialize in or to write about. First term paper is always a weird thing to do. Do we have any tips or any kind of approach that is good? A good way to get into the course literature?
Yeah. So I would say that, first of all, recognize where you are within your education, your academic journey, however you want to describe it. If you're a first-year bachelor, all of this is going to be new to you. But you don't really have to worry too much about that, because what's being presented will be a lot of general information on big ideas, big topics, big things happening within the field that you are going into. And so you're not expected to specialize in your first semester. At least not, I wouldn't say that you're expected to specialize in the type of, specific theory or specific concept or specific method that you want to tackle later on in your education. It's really an opportunity to just be practicing these sorts of skills, critical listening skills, attentive listening skills, critical reading skills. And again, what I would say for a bachelor student is focus on what is the outcome of the course. What are you expected to be able to do? And that's already been explained to you if you read the course description or the course evaluation before we got interrupted by clitorises.
Yes, let's try the course evaluation, the criterias. Did it happen? It didn't.
Okay. I'd say that's a great starting point to kind of help you figure out what are you supposed to be extracting here. And at the same time, you're going to get your head filled up with a bunch of new knowledge, and you're going to just get to kind of wander through this and try to pick out what's interesting to you, what's unique. But I would also say go into all of these courses by trying to figure out a purpose for yourself. What is it that I hope to learn? What is it? How do I think this course could help me apply something that I would like to do? And it might not be what you write a final project on. It might not be what you take a master's or PhD degree in, but it will give you something that helps to guide the type of information that you are pulling out from lectures and from your readings. And I think that purpose is a good point that you brought up, just key.
What I think you could also do is that if you look at the course description, you could look at some of the more important topics that you're going to go through, and you could kind of try to apply the what, how, and the why to these different topics.
Exactly.
And that's a really good way to start getting into it. There's usually also like one book that is also almost like gives you some kind of an overview when it comes to the discipline, like the status quo in science in your specific discipline. You could always start with that one. They're usually not too difficult to read because they're supposed to be like an introductory kind of thing. So I would suggest starting with something like that. Also something that just, I think this one looks interesting. So you just read two at the same time.
And this is just finding an entrance, I guess you could say. And this is great for master students, for PhDs as well. What are some additional entrance texts or entrance resources that are going to give you more of like an encyclopedic, if you could say so, an encyclopedic overview? Because that's what's so good about encyclopedias is they don't give you, massive volumes of fine-tuned specific details. It's about a very general overview. And so again, going to Wikipedia early on, using something like Wikipedia or Google searches and seeing what other people are writing about it to give you some diversity in ideas. Maybe someone is going to clarify something for you. Even looking at like dictionary definitions of concepts that you're unfamiliar with. YouTube, there's tons of great people all over the place, philosophers, scientists, researchers who their entire channels are just dedicated to kind of, this is what this concept means. Here is its evolution. Here's where it could potentially go in the future. And some of them are amazing. I mean, some of them are kind of utter garbage as well,
but some of them are really good. And you can probably just Google like best channel for, explaining theoretical physics or, theories in history. I don't know. But you're probably going to find some channels that people find to be really good and have a high production level.
Yeah, and I would even go so far as to say that the point of your course readings are to be entrance texts for you. They're to give you an introduction and an overview of some of what your professor thinks are the important things happening within that specific discipline, whether it is a background and history of how ideas have developed to get to where they are, or it is current debates happening. So the text that you are being given as your mandatory course readings, that's also your entranceway. The problem, I would say, with most of these is that it kind of comes down to a bit of a curse of knowledge sometimes. Your professors have had years and years of education and experience within the field, and they might forget that you coming in have little experience with the topic and probably even less experience with the format of communicating those ideas. So you can find some tough texts sometimes.
But not only that, like the ways of thinking, because that's sometimes, as you said, professors that have been working with this for 20, 30, 40 years, they're so used to thinking and sort of interpreting things using different theories that are very prominent within the field. So you could always go find a YouTube channel that explains these theories very nicely, or just presents the fundamentals of it. Or you could this is more if you're like first year master student, try to get a grip of the most important theories, and then you can basically analyze anything using the right concepts, the right way of thinking.
And so I think that with this connection to note-taking, there's also a lot of sort of project time management, workload management that needs to be done. And this varies from course to course and from educational level to educational level. If you're a bachelor or master's student, you may be in at an MBU, you may be taking a block course and you have 3 weeks. If you're a PhD, you may be taking a 1 week course, Monday to Friday. And
you just done a course like that, haven't you?
Yeah, that one was actually about 2.5 weeks long. So you're coming in, and especially if you're a bachelor or master student, you're probably taking multiple courses at the same time. So note taking, having good, effective strategies to take notes and get the important information is one thing, but also being able to just manage the reading material is another thing. And I think they kind of go hand in hand together, that different people are going to have different strategies. So a few that are immediately apparent to me are, if you can, and if it makes sense to you, start as early as possible. Get a head start on as much of this reading as you can. And take some notes
right away.
Yeah, and take notes on what you think the big important ideas are, or some interesting bit of information that you would like more information about. Now, this doesn't always work for everybody. Some people prefer to go to the lecture, hear a bunch of different opinions and discussion about the topic, and then the reading becomes sort of a supplement to that. They've kind of grounded themselves in a real world example of being in the classroom, being in the lecture, being in the debate.
It will be easier to understand the contents of the text.
And if that's the case, budget time for it and try to do it as soon as possible afterwards, so those ideas are still fresh and you can kind of link them. The idea is, either way, both are going to help you take notes, because the reading you do before the lecture can help inform questions you might want to ask to clarify in the lecture, which can help you to take better notes in the lecture. And writing those questions down while you're reading in advance is a good form of note-taking. And vice versa.
Another thing you should do is, if you have multiple courses in the same semester, as most bachelor and master students have, like 3 at least, you should try to find connections.
Exactly.
Very important. And if you can do that through some of its theoretical foundations or whatever, but just some way to make all these different things connected.
Forming the link.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's more or less the overarching thing that I was really trying to get at. You just said it more eloquently in fewer words. Forming those links between what you read and what you hear, or vice versa, what you hear and then what you read. What are the questions that you had that weren't answered, or information that you didn't get from the lecture that you can take to the readings afterwards? But, and we had touched on this a little earlier, that not all texts are going to be immediately easy to understand. And I think a lot of people can feel obligated to read everything. And if it's difficult for them to get through because it's poorly written, or the language is very difficult, maybe you're a second or third language user, English isn't your native language. Maybe it's just incredibly long and dense, and you're not immediately seeing connections to it. I think a big part of effective note-taking is also having effective strategies to be able to manage these large volumes of information, be it from the course, the lectures of the course, or be it the readings that you do. So what are some of the ways that, Niklas, that you go about taking as strategies to get through large amounts of reading?
What I could actually do now is that I could share my screen, because I'm working on a lecture. So it's in Norwegian, but I can just easily translate it as we go. But it presents 2 different ways to take notes, which I think it could be nice to just bring up right now. Let me see what happens here. Can you see it? Yeah?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let's do it. So this is one of the ways you could do it to take notes effectively. So first of all, you establish like a category, a theme. It could be anything. In this example, it's climate change effects, but it could be anything. It could be what Siri was talking about earlier. It depends on what you're what you're studying. So you establish a theme or a category. And I mean, if you have no direction yet, this might be a little bit difficult, but then you could take one of the central themes of the book or the article you're reading. That could be a way to do it. And if you have some direction, something that you're working on, let's say a term paper, then this should be a lot easier. And then source. You don't have to include the full source, but at least the author and the year. And the full source you put into the literature list later. And then you could start adding direct quotes or paraphrased information. So the way you would say something, write it in your own words. That is a good starting point. So try to avoid direct quotations, but if you find some of them to be really good and you want to use them in your paper, then you could obviously include them here. And don't forget to include a page number. So that's one approach.
And paraphrasing is huge. This, I think, is one of the major problems that a lot of people face when in a lecture or when they're reading and note-taking and, like you said, writing the book, or they are verbatim writing what the professor says or trying to furiously scribble down exactly what is written on the lecture slide. That doesn't help you form a connection that builds an understanding in your head. Remember, taking notes is about forming links to the bigger ideas, the bigger concepts and topics within the course, within the discipline. And wouldn't it make a lot more sense if you really tried to formulate that information in your own words? Because your words, the way that you express and describe things, tend to be ways that you understand.
And talking about making links, this is another approach. And I use something like this, but I also have I do some other things as well. So here's another way. First of all, you have the full reference. This is the way it would look in your literature list. And then you could write...
I'm just going to interrupt quick for anyone who's just listening on a podcast. We have a new slide, and it is a full reference, author's name, year, name of the article, where it was published, who the publisher was, that sort of thing.
The full thing. And then after that, you could write a summary of the text. So it could be an article. It could be part of an article. It could be a chapter in the book. It should be about 7 to 8 sentences, but this is obviously, it depends on how big the text in question is. And then after that, you should, let me just move this one around a little bit. Then you should write your thoughts about the text. And this one is very important, and you could easily combine it with the first system that I showed you. This is all about your ideas, how you connect the content to other things that you already know, to other sources. Or you could just come up with new ideas. That's also very important, that you could already start kind of analyzing something or producing very important arguments for your master thesis, for that sake, by including your thoughts, by producing new ideas.
And this is huge, because what is so good about the presentation that you have here, you've called it an annotated bibliography. You might also hear called a article or chapter summary, is can you take the big ideas that you have extracted from what you have just read and summarize it, write it down in one paragraph? What is this author trying to say? What is their purpose? Why is this idea important? And how are they presenting this sort of information? And then give yourself one paragraph afterwards to add your own thoughts. Do I agree? Do I disagree? What are some unanswered questions? Maybe this idea connects to what these authors were saying. This seems like a big disagreement between other things that I have been presented with. Maybe you just think it's a big pile of garbage. That has been my thoughts about some articles sometimes, or book chapters. I summarize it. I do this sort of method as well too from time to time. And sometimes that is my summary note, is this didn't really make a whole lot of sense, that this was an incredibly pretentious and difficult to understand article that said very little in a lot of words. Not useful. And that's not great, especially for me as a PhD, because when I have piles and piles of articles printed off and books on my desk all the time. And if I need to quickly go and grab something, I put these little summaries on the title page so that they're right there on the face of the article.
Yeah.
And when I pick it up and it's big and bold that says not useful, and then I have reasons why it's not useful, great. It's still good to keep that and have it, because that
it's a shortcut.
Exactly. And on the flip side, then when I read a really great article, totally useful for this exact purpose. it just makes it so much easier for you to remember, what was this useful for? It's that highlighter trick. You can't just highlight everything you read. You need to have a note indicating the relevance of why it was highlighted. What's the purpose of the highlight?
And you could also combine these two systems, so you could categorize all the things you want to use, like with a theme or a category, and then some paraphrased information under that. But you could always add your comments. And then, as we talked about, try to combine it with other stuff. That is very useful to get sort of like a broader understanding of the entire field.
Exactly.
Another thing you also should do is, or at least I find very useful, is add some humor to some of these comments. And it doesn't have to be fun for other people. You're not supposed to be a stand-up comic, but just fun for you, so you remember it more easily. So that's sort of like more of a psychological trick than anything else. But they're very useful when it comes to remembering information.
And we've covered some different techniques that you can use, study techniques, reading techniques, learning techniques, under our episode on multiple intelligences. I think it's titled Your Multiple Intelligences. And it essentially looks at different ways that you can kind of read and take notes that are going to be effective for you and how you learn and how you memorize things. So yeah, you and I, we use humor a lot. When we're not podcasting, even when we are podcasting, we try to inject a little bit of laughter here and there. But that's not for everybody. Maybe you're better. I've seen people who doodle a lot, drawing in the margins, putting arrows all over the place. The point is forming these connections between what is being presented and how you're going to remember it and make it relevant for your understanding of the topic.
I mean, if you're very much into superheroes, I mean, it doesn't matter. You could use anything that you're interested in as sort of like a framework to understand things more easily. And it's very much connected to this. I think you have these people that like compete in memory. You know, you're supposed to memorize 800 numbers or something like that, and they use this system, right? That you walk through your house, and you meet all these different people, and they represent a number.
And they're odd, and they're doing something odd. Their action or their placement is bizarre, so that these are not everyday interactions. If we can remember that, I'll try to put it in the show notes as a memorization trick. I've heard of that one before, but I can't remember what it's called.
But it's somewhat similar, right? If you're talking about Albert Einstein and when he formulated the special and the general relativity, you could always say something like he was a G or something like that. Just to make it easier for you to remember.
Well, he was a G. Similar. I've heard him being called the OG of modern physics.
Oh yeah. Most definitely, the OG. So you could write stuff like that if you find it funny and if it's a way for you to remember it. Or you could add a drawing or arrows, mind mapping, all different kinds of things. Then you could combine these different approaches. But what is very important is that don't develop a system that gets so intricate and so big that you start forgetting what the different symbols mean.
Yeah.
Try to keep it simple.
The system isn't the point of what you should be focusing on. The system is the tool to help you focus on.
Exactly.
Word. Yeah.
It's not like if you use Word to write a text, like don't write the text about Word. That's not the point. It's supposed to be the vessel.
Exactly.
It's not the...
And so a really good system that is something that I think we've kind of been forced into and maybe hadn't really been recognized by a lot of people in an academic setting, needing to work remotely. We have had group sharing capabilities via cloud servers, things like Google Drive, or if you're at NMBU, we have access to OneDrive, and you can share collaborative documents. And I think that this can be a really huge and helpful thing for taking notes.
We use that a lot.
Yeah, you and I, that's how our show notes are shared. That's how we do most of our work. And so we take advantage of this, but here's a great thing that you can end up doing. Get together with a few friends, have a collaborative document, because let's say during a lecture, each of you can be taking your own notes. You should maybe color code or use a different section or something like that. But the idea is that one, you have a quick and easy chat that you could maybe ask somebody about something. They might have the answer. Another opportunity is if you are not able to be present, then you have access to the notes that other people have been taking. And I'm not saying you should slack off and not collaborate. No, collaboration is very important with this. So it's give and take. Everybody has to contribute. But the other great thing about it is you can see how other people kind of interpret and analyze this information. And maybe different people have found different things to be important, and you can discuss with each other afterwards and start forming these links on your own. So having these collaborative note-taking documents can be really useful, and you can apply it to reading as well.
And you should discuss it, because
Yes.
this is something that is so overlooked. It seemed like a lot of people are just at home reading, not really discussing the course literature with other people. And we discuss things all the time. Like what the show is supposed to be about, PhD webinars, different kind of theories, new digital resources. It could be pedagogical theories that we think could be really good to base some of these resources on. Lots of different things. And the thing is that writing is one medium that is very good, but talking, it goes so much faster. You can communicate so many different ideas within 10 minutes. It takes a long time to write that much.
Exactly. And that helps to spark different ideas and clarifies things. And maybe, it's like that, what I had brought up, that the phenomenon in university classrooms where nobody wants to ask a question to get clarification, despite the fact that you are here to learn about a bunch of stuff. Some people just are not very comfortable with that. And smaller groups, be it, an online chat via Zoom or Skype or Teams, whatever medium you want to end up using. Exactly. The discussion is so vital, and it can be very helpful to clarify things. It can be very helpful, maybe not even just to clarify what you think the important idea is, but to clarify some sort of underlying assumptions that you're bringing into this reading and into the way that you view your science. And that can be very helpful.
I mean, Mike, the boss of the Learning Center, and a close colleague to both of us, your boss as well. And I mean, we just call each other and just discuss like some kind of philosophical idea or some ethical implication to sustainable development. I mean, it might not be. Sometimes it's a more of a vague philosophical discussion, and sometimes it's very much concrete, and it's about something like who you're gonna talk to first, like something very grounded. But I think these conversations are very important, and they should not be overlooked. Don't sit at home and just read and write the term paper. Try to discuss with other people, and I think it's important to be a pain in the ass to a certain extent. I mean, question everything. Talk to all the students. Talk to your professor. That's the best way to. There's something about trying to explain to someone something complicated. You really need to know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And that's very good approach.
And sometimes the way that you try to explain something helps you just make that instant connection in your head. And, I just get it now. The light goes off and it all makes sense. And, so there are all of these different strategies that they work really well together. But collaboration, discussion, recognizing that it isn't just sitting and listening, it isn't just sitting and reading. Thinking and discussing are a large part of taking good notes as well. But at the same time, you're always going to end up having to sit and read things alone and in isolation. And so I thought...
And there's hours of just sitting like this.
Yeah.
Just...
and this is something that I've been so surprised by as well, that when I sit and talk with people, I've taken PhD courses and we sit and discuss things, and people end up saying, oh, it was just very dense. That was difficult to understand. I didn't even actually read all of it. I don't think that you should feel bad about that sort of thing, but what you could do to make yourself feel better is try to come up with some reading strategies for yourself that I would say, especially when you have 3 or 4 articles or chapters that you're supposed to read before your next class, develop a priority system. And the way that I like to work through it is try to determine, okay, is this an article? Is this a book chapter? Because articles will tend, not always, but tend to be shorter than a chapter. So I can already prioritize, okay, if I want like quick reads to get into what this topic is about, I should probably start with the articles, especially if I'm strapped for time. And then go in and also develop some strategies that further break these down. The good thing about articles is they'll have abstracts, and you can read the shortest bits. Start with the abstract. What is supposed to be contained here? Read the introduction, read the conclusion. That's where the majority of the important information typically ends up being.
Is it relevant for me now?
Yeah.
Is it interesting? Is it? Have I read something similar before? I mean,
exactly.
It's very different with a book chapter or an entire book. Chapters, where you kind of just have to get into it.
Book chapters are not always like that. So the strategy that I employ for when I look at book chapters is go immediately to the end. Is there a summary or is there a conclusion? Because that's going to be a half page, 1 page, maybe a page and a half. Can I just read that? Because that's going to summarize everything across this 60 pages. And it's going to give me a good assessment of, okay, is this writing clear? Can I understand it? Is it cohesive? Does it make sense to me? Is this going to be a text that I'm going to struggle with? And if it's something that's going to be a struggle for me, I'm going to leave it to the end. I want as much information that's easily accessible to me in the other mandatory readings as possible to be able to prime myself for something I'm going to struggle with. And even if I can't get through that big, difficult document, I have gotten through most, if not everything else, that I still have enough of an understanding to be able to have some good ideas of what the important ideas are.
Or when you talked about this priming or having the right competence to understand a text, as we started this podcast with, it was this book, We Have Never Been Modern. That was the one that I was struggling with, written by the French philosopher. Mm-hmm. You could always use other resources as well and other people's understanding of the same text. That's also another way to prime yourself.
Reviews. And responses. Yeah.
But you could always, as you said, try to read the conclusion. And if that one is interesting, but it's still kind of difficult to understand, then okay, let's read the entire book or the chapter. Or you could start kind of priming yourself, preparing to read the whole thing, and it will probably make the process so much easier for you. You don't have to read the same page 6 times in a row to understand its contents.
And I would even say that there's a few more great tricks that technology provides us with that a lot of people are not familiar with. So one that we've already talked about is, if this is difficult, has somebody else written on it? Can you do a quick search on the topic or on that author and see if there are responses, if there are co-authors, if there's somebody who is critiquing them? Do a quick keyword search based off of what the chapter title is, what the article title is, what keywords might appear in the first page, and get some of that priming information for yourself. Read other people's material that might be more accessible, written in a way that is clearer and easier for you to understand. Or one of my favorite tricks is the PDF navigation function. So if you have a computer, Windows or Mac, they're built with either, it goes under a couple different names. It might be navigation, it might be search, it might be find. But there's typically a hotkey, the Control, CTRL button, and F. Generally ends up working. I believe it is the command button on a Mac.
On a Mac,
F.
yeah.
And in a PDF, an internet browser page, or a Microsoft Word document, it will pop up this find function, and you can search that document for a particular key word.
Could be
And
contextualization. It could be
totally.
theory. It could be anything that you're looking for.
Search for synonyms of this word as well too, and see where it pops up, because you might have a reading, mandatory reading, that really only mentions this important idea on the 17th page. And you can quickly go and just read that paragraph and see, do I get enough information out of this? Okay, what's another idea that's contained in here? And can I search through and find where that is located? And it gives you a bit of a better sense of, I think, where to find the information that you're really looking to get.
And I mean, since a lot of people are going to work from home to a certain extent anyways, even as a student, you could do this together with other people. You could share the screen, hook up the text, and you could search for different keywords, or you could go through, like, let's say the abstract together. There's many different ways to kind of work with this. And I think some of these digital resources are really giving us opportunities that has been a little bit strange. I mean, you could just highlight a section of the text. It's very easy to do when sharing the screen, and you could, take different parts of that information, you could translate it, you could do a lot of different things to it. But if you bring up the text, like, physically, like, here's the book, and you start, I don't know, the digital tools are really giving us some really powerful functions.
And so all of this is going to come down to you needing to just do some work. But it's not overly difficult. But it's going to take a bit of practice and routine and structure to get into it. And then your system of note-taking is going to develop. You might need to go through some trial and error. You might need to try a couple of different approaches that we've talked about here. You might want to do some additional research on effective note-taking techniques. But with enough practice, it's going to be like anything else. You're going to get better at it. It's going to refine. It's how you approach reading and lectures is going to become better. You're going to be able to get more out of it. So whether you're a first-year bachelor student who's just found this podcast, or whether you are, into the second year of your master's, or whether you're a PhD who's somewhere in the middle or near the end, realistically, everybody has to end up taking these notes. We've said it as well too. For this podcast, we're taking notes. When we're developing new resources for the Writing Center, we're continuously taking notes. All of the lectures, the webinars, everything that we do starts as notes. And it builds up to something a lot bigger. So don't be scared of the process, but kind of figure out what your process is.
And also remember, I mean, taking these notes it's not only about remembering or understanding the content of articles and books, but it's really powerful if you want to, or if you have to write a term paper or a thesis or something. This could you can organize them in a way so you will have the blueprint. Or the, what do you call it? The framework, the disposition in English. What is the word again?
The disposition?
Not really.
It's got a couple different meanings. So
there's another word that is more commonplace. It's called the outline. Yes.
That's the one.
That's the one. So all these different notes, if you really good at taking notes and organizing them, it should be relatively easy to build a good outline.
Yeah.
Or a paper.
All of this stuff is the earliest stages, but engages so many of these different skills, critical and attentive listening skills, critical engagement during your lectures, discussion and debate with your peers, critical reading, research skills, organization skills, writing skills. All of this stuff culminates in notes. And it's those notes and that culmination of skills that, as you say, culminates into outlines that culminate into the writing that you can end up doing. So I don't know why we waited so long to get around to a very fundamental step of.
We've been talking about it like
it's been peppered throughout, but it seemed like it was finally time to give it its due and talk about some ways that you can really get in and take your notes and the importance of it. And I mean, with that, I guess if you get started early and you develop this system for yourself the whole rest of the semester, regardless of COVID-19, probably going to be all right.
It is going to be all right. Start
all right.
early.
Niklas, again, thanks for another great episode. It's good to see you on this one as well, too. And I hope that our kickstart to season 2 is not going to be derailed by a whole bunch more Siri recommendations. Maybe that's next episode's topic. I don't know.
Maybe. But the good thing is that, okay, it's going to be bi-weekly, but now we have video. You could actually see us and we could pull up some resources as we talk. I think that could be a very powerful tool that would make this much more informative. And, so I'm looking forward to the next episode already.
Me as well.
Too bad it's going to be in 2 weeks.
I know. Well, it'll give us time to work out the kinks then.
I guess so. All right.
Great,
See you later.
Till next time.